Welcome aboard the Heritage. I have just a few important things to inform you of as we get underway. One is that we do have plenty of life jackets on board. And they are located in the overhead compartments in the main cabin in clearly marked areas. The adult jackets are in the direct overhead, and the children's jackets are in the overhead off to each side. The donning instructions for the life jackets are posted in the cabin up by the bar. If you have any questions as to how the life jackets are used, please don't hesitate to contact the crew. Salto bar in the cabin if you'd like anything there. We do have cold beer and wine, mixed drinks, soft drinks, bottled water, snacks, sandwiches, and New England clam chowder. Our heads or toilets are located just behind the wheelhouse, with the ladies on the port or left-hand side and the men's on the starboard side. We do ask that you please do not smoke while on board the vessel, and also for everyone's enjoyment, if you could please refrain from talking on cell phones. And if you are standing or walking around, always a good idea to keep one hand for the rail, just in case we do run into a bumpy spot. We are now heading down the Piscataqua River, which acts as the borderline between the states of Maine and New Hampshire. To our left we have Kittery, the oldest town in the state of Maine, and of course Portsmouth here to the right. Both these towns settled in 1623. This river is the second fastest tidal river in the United States that is navigable by ships, with the fastest being the Columbia on the west coast. And we have currents here averaging 4 knots in speed, and we have an average tidal range of 8 feet. Just ahead we have the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, located on Seavey Island in Kittery. This is the oldest naval shipyard in the United States and opened in the year of 1800. And today they work on fast attack submarines here. We have 4 subs in the yard, 2 of which are visible, and those 2 subs are just up ahead of us, with one on either side of this pier ahead. On the left-hand side of the pier, we have the USS Springfield, the sole Los Angeles class fast attack sub in the yard. And on the right-hand side of the same pier, next to crane number 37, the USS New Mexico, which is one of 3 Virginia-class fast attack subs here. The Virginia-class subs are the newer class of fast attack sub that is replacing the Los Angeles-class subs as they retire. The subs are much larger than they look. Only about 1/3 of a submarine is visible as it sits on the surface. These subs draw about 32 feet of water at midships. Subs come here for a variety of reasons and normally stay for about 1.5 years. They come for scheduled maintenance and upgrades, and also to be decommissioned. That's where the sub has reached the end of its life of about 30 years. They then remove much of the equipment on board in preparation for scrapping of the sub. They did once build submarines here. A total of 138 subs were built at this yard between the years of 1918 and 1971. 74 of those subs built in a 4-year span during World War II, when this was one of the most important sub-building yards in the country. At that time, over 20,000 people worked here, and 70% of that workforce were women.
That would be great.
And many of the subs were built inside the large gray building that we have ahead to our left. During the war, they were building up to 8 subs at a time inside this structure. This yard is also home to 3 Coast Guard cutters, one of which we have in port just ahead, the 270-foot cutter Campbell. the Piscataqua River bends to the left just ahead. We will follow the river down to the harbor entrance and out onto the Atlantic, and then we'll head out to the Isle of Shoals. When we return, we'll take a different route back by going into Little Harbor. We'll come around the backside of Newcastle Island and return into the river by passing under the bridge that is up ahead. And while in the harbor, you can follow along on our brochure, as there is an aerial photo of the harbor inside so that you can trace our route as we continue along. If you don't already have one of those, we do have some in the cabin. We are departing Portsmouth. We have Newcastle to our right, a town that is situated solely on islands. Just to our right we have Goat Island, and then ahead to the right is Newcastle, also known as the Great Island. This large building coming up on our left is the Portsmouth Naval Prison. This has been closed since 1974, but while it was open, it was the most feared brig in the Navy. This is where the Navy sent some of their worst criminals, sailors who had gone astray of the law, and many were sent to this facility for life. The sailors called this the Rock, or the Castle, and no one wanted to end up here. In fact, you'll often hear this mentioned in old war movies. When someone steps out of line, the officer will threaten to send them to Portsmouth, and that normally straightens them out. This was mentioned in just about every episode of McHale's Navy. The guards here were Marines, and they were told that if they allowed a prisoner to escape past them, they would then serve the remainder of that prisoner's sentence. Now there's a story about this prison that concerns a man that many of us know of. And during the First World War, he was a Naval Shore Patrol officer, or SP, stationed in New York. And he was given the task of escorting a sailor who had done something wrong up to the prison. And so they got onto a train which took them to South Station in Boston, where they then had to get off the train and make their way through the city to North Station to get onto another train to come up here. And during this transit through the city, the prisoner asked the guard if he wouldn't light him a cigarette. And while doing so, the prisoner tried to get away by slamming his wrists, which were shackled, up into the guard's face, badly cutting his lip, and he actually got away. But the guard, thinking that he would have to serve this man's term if he did not catch him, quickly did so, and got him onto that train and up here to the brig at Portsmouth. The SP was then sewn up by the medic here, who didn't do the greatest job, because the repair to the lip ended up in quite a scar, and also in a very noticeable lisp, which later became somewhat of this man's trademark. And that SP's name was Humphrey Bogart. Up ahead and off to the left with Kittery Point, Maine. The anchorage ahead to the left is Pepperell Cove. And the fort up on the hill off to our left is Fort McClary. Ahead to our right we have Fort Point here in Newcastle, and this point has been occupied by military force since the 1630s, when the British had a small fort here known as His Majesty's Castle. Then in the middle of the 1700s, the British built a second fort here known as Fort William and Mary, which was the site of the first act of organized aggression against the British Crown, which occurred on December 13th of 1774, when approximately 300 townspeople stormed this fort, which was only lightly guarded at the time, and they stole over 100 kegs of black powder, which later proved to be extremely important in the beginning battles of the Revolution. This is now called Fort Constitution, and today is home to the Coast Guard. They keep their smaller rescue boats here. The outer wall of the cannon ports was built in 1860. The second wall inside that constructed in 1808. And as we come around the point, we've got a nice view and photo opportunity of Fort Point Light, also known as Portsmouth Harbor Light. Ahead we have Wood Island, and the house on this island is an old lifeboat station, once occupied by the United States Lifeboat Service. They were the predecessors to the Coast Guard, and the men who lived and worked in this building would have left here in rowboats to save sailors in distress. This house was recently renovated by a non-profit that hopes to open this as a museum. That'll probably be still a couple of years away before that occurs, and when this does open, it will be accessible only by boat. Now, there was never a bridge out to this island. Those blocks that you see in the water to the left of it were all part of the anchoring system for a submarine net that crossed the harbor entrance during World War II. That net ran from Wood Island and then went over into the area ahead to the right where there's a low brick building with a flag above it. That was Fort Stark. And this net prevented German U-boats from sneaking into the harbor and attacking the shipyard, which was a very real threat. There were also 4 forts surrounding the harbor entrance. So one of those was back to our right at Fort Point, and then off to our left, Fort Foster on Garish Island, and then Fort Stark up ahead to the right where the net ran to. And the fourth one I'll mention when we come back from the shoals and go into Little Harbor. Further out ahead to the left, Whaleback Light, the southernmost lighthouse in the state of Maine. Built in 1870. Stands at 60 feet above the water at high tide. And on a number of occasions, waves have crashed to the top of this lighthouse. The last time that happened was in October of 1991 during a nor'easter that has been dubbed the No Name Storm. Is now